Hi, everybody, and welcome to whoa. I was about to say welcome to class, but I got kind of startled there. We got a panda bear just back there chilling. Okay. Shall I go and maybe try to give the panda bear a treat? Or panda bears like sweet and like cuddly, kind of like my dog here. Say hi, say hi. Okay. Or are they dangerous and fierce? Or maybe they have a gentle side, a yin, and a more ferocious side, a yang. Well, we're about to find out. Well, in a little bit. We'll go meet some panda bears in a little bit. So we both have this, the point is a panda can be probably cute and cuddly, have this gentle side, but also have this ferocious side. And these sides are not in conflict, but are rather two complementary aspects that make up a whole. Things that we think as being opposites in the religion we're going to be learning about in the next 2 weeks, Taoism, are actually complementary. They rely on each other. And the yin and the yang symbol is a good example of that. And we'll take a look at that fairly shortly. All right, let's go ahead and get started. All right, last week we ended up looking a little bit at, well, we ended up finishing up our 2-week section on Confucianism. And this week we're going to begin something that becomes, so the question is Confucianism a religion? Is Taoism a religion? Taoism is what you've read about this week and what we're going to be learning about in the lecture. Well, remember, Confucius or Kongchu did not view himself as establishing a new religion, but rather restoring the ethics, the values, the rituals, the music of the ancient dynastic past, from the era of the Duke of Zhou and the era of the 5 emperors and 3 sovereigns, just restoring the customs and traditions that will allow us to develop this inner sense of virtue, this Ren, but did not view himself as starting a new religion per se. We also learned that Confucius, during his time, while gathering disciples, who in turn gathered disciples, who in turn gathered disciples, part of a lineage that supposedly goes back to Confucius, was not very influential, even though he becomes very influential. And that's during the Han period, where the Han would see Confucianism as being a good outlet for training the next generation of government ministers, for having ethical norms to unite the society, for having principles of government. So Confucius was all about society, custom, and tradition. This week, we're going to meet another individual, sometimes pronounced Lao Tzu or Lao Tzu, whichever one you want to pick, you could just go with that. There are different dialects of Chinese, and the language has changed over time. Not entirely sure this individual existed historically, but supposedly Chinese historians trace his life back to the same kind of era of Confucius, and that is during the Zhou dynasty. And one of the main arguments of this class is the religions of China very much are in dialogue with each other. They intersect with one another. And it's not always clear cut who's a Buddhist, Taoist, or Confucianist. one can incorporate multiple elements of these traditions in their lives, and many Chinese might even claim to not be religious or be atheist, and yet still follow traditions associated with Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism, whether it's etiquette for greeting the family, the celebrating of the Chinese New Year, maybe going on a pilgrimage with the family. All right, in a very significant period for the development of Chinese religion, this is what we've been focusing on the last 2 weeks, is the Zhou dynasty. The Zhou dynasty is where we start to see this notion of the mandate of heaven, that if the ruler is ruling, it's because heaven has mandated it and has ordained that ruler. Now, what is heaven? We'll try to figure that out a little bit today, because there's actually many conceptions of heaven, or Tian, in China. All right, moving forward, we are looking at an era called the Spring and Autumn era of the Zhou dynasty. And things are not good. Society is supposedly falling apart. And again, this is according to a lot of these are written sources that we that describe period in this way. The great peace of the ancient past, or remember that we saw how Chinese history writing views the Xia dynasty, the early era of Zhou, the early era of Shang as, and then the prehistorical periods going back to this one great yellow emperor as being peaceful and harmonious. So a peaceful and harmonious society is possible, kind of like a utopia. In fact, we can use this word utopia. And when things are not utopian, when things are not peaceful and harmonious, it's time to ask why. What's going on? This is not how things ought to be. Well, we saw Confucius in the Spring and Autumn era. This is a time of warring states, different warlords, different individuals vying for power. Confucius wanted to ask this question, well, what went wrong? And for him, it was the decline of Li, these ritual traditions, the decline of the musical traditions, the artistic traditions, the social etiquette, and the inner virtue that he calls Ren. All of these things were declining, and inner virtue and the practice of ritual are very, very, very much inseparable in the view of Confucius. But they're in decline, and because of that, all the social relations are in chaos. Father, son, the emperor and the emperor and the subjects, husband and wife, this complete chaos. So Confucius sought to restore the ancient rituals and show people through his teachings the way of cultivating the virtue needed to restore the harmony that had been lost. Well, there were some other key figures in the Zhou period, and we're going to be learning about them in today's class. There is Mozi, Lao Tzu, and Chuang-Tzu. Let's begin. So again, this is all part of a period of supposed war and social collapse and chaos. All of these figures that we're looking at, they all have these central questions to think through. Why do we live in an age of chaos? How do we live in peace? How do we find peace again? What makes a good ruler? So through much of the history of China, through most of its history, religion and government were always one. Religion had a place to play in governments. We saw this going all the way back to the Shang dynasty, where the emperor was kind of like a poet, a magic king, a magic ruler who would use divination practices involving oracle bones to try to divine the will of heaven, to divine the will of the ancestors and rule accordingly. Okay, and how can those on earth harmonize with the heaven and the way or order of the universe? So heaven has multiple conceptions. Some will view heaven as just this natural force and entity that resides and pervades us. Some thinkers will view heaven more as like a godlike figure. It's very kind of ambiguous what heaven is in the Chinese context, depending upon really the time, the historical period, the sources of literature, the individual thinkers. And with heaven, there's also this way, this force that pervades us, that guides us to harmonize with heaven, and that's called the Tao. Now, I do want to address this right now because this is going to be confusing for some of us. You notice how I have two spellings, one with the T and one with the D? That is because when we take a language written in one script and we put it into our own script, this is called transliteration. And there are different systems of transliterating Chinese into the English alphabet. Some will use a T, some will use a D. I think your textbook uses a D. You can pick whichever one you want, just be consistent. All right, now we're gonna meet Mo Z, Master Mo. He's gonna be circa 479 to 381. And I apologize, that's not CE, that's BCE, before Common Era. So just for your notes, let's go ahead and fix that up here. Before Common Era, the followers were known as followers of Mohism. And for Master Mo, there is a supreme Lord of heaven, and he often describes heaven very similar to what we might think of as a monotheistic deity of some sort. This supreme Lord loves everyone, watches over everyone. Heaven bestows a crown. Who gets that crown? It is the ruler who can rule according to this principle of universal love. And for Master Mo and his followers to practice universal love. And this means loving everyone equally. So remember, for Confucius, we had very specific relationships: father, son, elder brother, younger brother, ruler, subject. Master Mo is saying, no, let's get rid of those distinctions. Let's love everyone equally. Master Mo was very much a pacifist, and his followers very much against war. Where as much of the history of Chinese society is the history of dynasties, of rule through hereditary descent, Master Mo believed very much in meritocracy, that one could rise up in society to high positions regardless of their class or status, such as they displayed the qualities that would please heaven. Master Mo didn't like us arguing and shouting back and forth, back and forth. Ah! You get some heated debates. You ever watch the news these days? Master Mo is like, let's try to find things that we have consensus on, and just build on that. All right, now we need our textbook. We'll look at a few of these. Few quotes. Do note these. Let's take a look at page 66. And again, this is from your Sources of Chinese Religion textbook. He says, and this is selections from Mozi, section 9, honoring the worthy. And this is kind of the, I know it's a little hard to see here, but it's this paragraph section right here. Our panda bear friend is, who we're gonna go meet some pandas later. Just hang with me here. Our panda bear friend, sorry, our Master Mo. He says, the sage kings of ancient times took great pains to honor the worthy and employ the capable, showing no special consideration for their own kin, no partiality for the eminent and rich, no favoritism for the good looking and attractive. They promoted the worthy to high places, enriched and honored them, and made them heads of government. The unworthy they demoted and rejected. Okay. So, first of all, if you go back and you read the passage, notice how he refers to the sage kings of the past. This is a pattern of Chinese history writing. The great leaders of the past were sagacious. These were wise individuals. Master Mo is saying these leaders, they didn't care about your physical appearance. They didn't care about your birth. And again, this might be, whether or not this is true or not historically is one thing, but this is how the past is remembered. It's remembered as kind of this golden age. So Master Mo said that the old leaders, they promoted people based on merit, not on any other social distinction. And he talks about rulers, and this is on page 67. This is the very first sentence. Leaders who lead in a way of equality, they please heaven. And he says this, first such rulers, then heaven and the spirits will send down riches. The other feudal lords will become their allies, and the people of the realm will feel affection for them, and the worthy will come forward to serve them. Thus, all that they plan, they will achieve, and all that they undertake will be brought to a successful conclusion. So we have a couple things. We have heaven, and this might be kind of we learned this word henotheism. There's this one high God, because this passage says heaven and the spirits. So the ruler who is ruling justly this great heaven and these lesser spirits are going to come and reward this ruler, bring this ruler what is needed for the ruler to succeed. But where's the love, you might ask? The love. Let's find the love. On page 70, this is about the second complete paragraph on page 70 of your readings. Partiality should be replaced by universality. But how can partiality be replaced by universality? If men were to regard the states of others as they regard their own, then he would raise up his state to attack the state of another. It will be like attacking his own. If men were to regard cities of others, they regard as their own, then who would raise up his city to attack the city of another? All right. And then the paragraph above. When we inquire into the cause of the various harms, what do we find has produced them? I'm pausing there. When we look at the warring states period, where in the previous passage we should treat everyone as we would treat ourselves, what's going on? Why are we getting harmed? So he asks this question. He says, do these harms come about from loving others and trying to benefit them? Surely not. They come rather from hating others and trying to injure them. And then we set out to classify and describe those who hate and injure others. So we said that their actions are motivated by universality or partiality. Okay. Are we being impartial when we go about harming or selectively loving others? The answer is surely we must answer by partiality. And in this partiality and their dealings with one another, that gives rise to all the great harms in the world. Therefore, we know that partiality is wrong. So not showing favoritism, this impartial, unconditional love. So that's the teachings of Master Mo and some ideas of kind of a blueprint of how to, in the eyes of these authors, restore the kingdom and society of the sage kings of the past. Now let's get to Taoism. Now we have what do we have, everyone? We have our nature break. Yeah, let's sit down, let's enjoy a little bit of nature. You can see our little panda friends behind us. Just chilling here. Hear my dog. My dog is growling a bit. This is more nature. Okay, girl, leave it. All right, let's take a look. Let us meet some panda bears. Sorry, little technical difficulties. 1 second here. Looks like dogs to me. All right, as we are navigating, so remember that this is feng shui, mortal path. Here we go. We're going to a panda breeding center, and I think this is Chengdu, China. And we're going to meet 23 baby pandas. Otherwise, we're not going to experience the Tao, the way. And I'm actually quite serious about that. But I'm getting ahead of myself. All righty, I believe that was a panda cub that we just saw there. Now time for our commercial break. Okay, So why did we go see it? And you saw how that panda bear was like playing with the bird. They were in harmony with each other. And it looked like a little panda was being nurtured by a human. That's what it kind of looked like to me, being milked or given milk. Well, there is a reason as to why we all sometimes need panda bears. We all sometimes need nature breaks. And this is our tradition of Taoism, and we're learning about the individual named Lao Tzu now. Lao Tzu was one of the key figures of the Warring State periods, although many debate whether or not he was an actual individual, or rather sometimes a bunch of different authors come together to produce a text, and they take the name of one author, perhaps taking the name of a great sage. And this is Chuang-Tzu, another key individual of Taoism. So Confucius was all about society, rituals, studying, passing civil service exams, coming together, being social. And there's something to be said about it. But do you ever feel like maybe you get burned out if you need some time to yourself? Maybe you've been out, you're going out, you're having a good time, but now I'm kind of tired, time to go home. Or maybe I've just been cooped up way too long. I need to get out. Well, let's get out. Because Taoism, and I want to preference this. Taoism emerges as a Chinese religious system throughout different dynastic periods. We're looking at some of the root ideas and some of the foundational figures from a specific period of history, and that is the Zhou era. So Taoism in its earliest stages was a tradition about, to some extent, withdrawing from society, going out into nature, discovering and feeling this unspeakable quality of nature that is called the Tao. And you feel it within. So whereas Confucianism in general was associated with society and ritual, Taoism appealed more to those who were more kind of reclusive, wanted to get away from it all, go out to nature. And nature is the ultimate teacher. And through nature, we can and it's not something that you learn about through books and rules and regulations, but something that can be experienced through harmonized with. All right, so the Tao. The Tao means the way. The way to what? And that's a debate throughout the history of this tradition. Well, it's a way to some kind of natural, harmonious state. This is a constant flow of the universe. So the Tao is not something static. It's not some kind of godlike being, at least not in its early kind of intellectual development of this idea. It's rather some kind of force that exists and flows. It's experienced in nature and experienced within. This experience is the harmonizing of opposite forces, the yin and the yang. Whereas Confucius wanted to look at rituals and etiquette to find out what was right or wrong, in Taoism, there is this virtue that is taught. I think this is the word day, is taught to us by nature through observing how opposing forces interact and harmonize. This principle of Taoism that we experienced in nature is also an experience of something within. This is the word qi. This is energy, a life force, a vital essence. We'll learn more about this next week as we go into Taoist meditation. Experienced through inaction. So Taoism will have a strong emphasis on sitting still, living a simple life. So Lao Tzu and Chuang-Tzu are key figures, and let's look at Lao Tzu. The main book attributed to Lao Tzu is the Tao Te Ching. Most scholars say that this text, which is fairly short, is something that's compiled over time by numerous authors who will take the name Lao Tzu, who will attribute their writings to this ancient figure. And Lao Tzu talks about the Tao, our way, revealed in nature as the union of opposites and the flow of the universe. So much as this is review. If anyone ever watched martial arts film, there was a famous martial artist named Bruce Lee, and he was inspired by the Tao Te Ching, which uses a lot of water imagery. Now let's remember from the first couple weeks of class, Chinese civilizations often develop around major rivers like the Yellow River. Well, water flows. If you put water in a cup, it takes the shape of a cup. If you put water in the palm of your hands, it adjusts and takes on that shape. So constantly going with the flow of nature. Wu Wei as the basis of governments. So you ever kind of feel like you're restless? You kind of have to keep doing stuff. Where's my to-do list here? Let's take a look here. Let me cross off my to-do list. Or have any of you ever been in, have any had a job where you've had to work for someone and you kind of feel like they're constantly looking over your shoulder, they're kind of micromanaging you? Well, most people don't enjoy that. For Lao Tzu, you kind of have to let things take their natural course and not interfere. And it's because of being overly ambitious, overly controlling, overly micromanaging, that a lot we fall out of harmony. We get wrapped up in our ambitions. And we'll take a look at just a few texts. And let's take a look at page 79, verse 1. Page 79, verse 1. The way that can be spoken of is not the constant way. The name that can be named is not the constant name. Nameless is the beginning of heaven and earth. Anybody want to tell me what that says? I've been trying to figure this out for like 20 years. Well, one way of understanding it is the Tao is a natural force, that it is not a human creation, whereas language is a human creation. This harmonious force existed before language and is beyond words. And this is why, when you're doing this week's readings from the Tao Te Ching and from Chuang-Tzu, the writing often is full of paradoxes, metaphors. Things are written indirectly. And let's now take a look at page 89, verse 48. And this has to do with this concept of Wu Wei, of non-action. devotion to learning means increasing day by day. So this is maybe talking about those Confucius scholars who are studying for like the civil service exam and wanting to work in governments. Next sentence. Devotion to the way means decreasing day by day. So these are the Taoists who want to get away from the hustle and bustle of society and hang out in nature. Decreasing and decreasing still more, one arrives at doing nothing. Well, when one does nothing, one sits still. One will sit still. One will breathe. One will experience the vital essence, the chi within. And we're going to, again, these are practices of meditation and yoga coming up next week. If one would take control of all under heaven, one should always refrain from activity. One who is engaged in activity is unworthy to control all under heaven. So this is his advice to rulers. Hey, you rulers, don't tax the people. Hey, you rulers, stop going on conquests. Leave the people alone. Let them live their lives. That's the vision of government that Lao Tzu is giving. And this is in many ways a little bit different than what Confucius is doing. Confucius wants to advise and administer and guide. Lao Tzu is like, live in harmony with nature, you rulers, let the farmers farm, let the rain come. If you start acting and ordering and commanding and restricting, you're out of harmony with the way, and we're going to have the chaos that we're seeing now. Now, our final verse is page 80, verse 2. When everyone in the world knows beauty as beauty, ugliness appears. When everyone knows good as good, not good arrives. Therefore, being and non-being give birth to one another. Difficulty and easy give completion to one another. Long and short form one another. High and low fill one another. This goes to the union and harmony of opposites, the yin and the yang, a very, very important principle for the development of Taoism. So traits of yin and yang. Yin is often seen as negative, yang positive, yin passive, active, feminine, masculine, heavenly, and earthly. One is not better than the other, rather they rely on each other for their existence. We can only comprehend one in existence of the other. Opposing forces need each other. They're mutually arising. And you can see there's a little bit elements of one in the other. Hence you see the black dot here and the white dot here. All right, balance and harmony of the Tao. This is balance of the body, balance of society and nature, and then harmony of governments. Let's start with the body and let's take a look at a practice called Tai Chi. I've done a little bit of Tai Chi. Have any of you done Tai Chi? I recommend it. Maybe they offer some free classes on Tai Chi. Let's take a look at a short video demonstrating some Tai Chi principles. All right. The immortal path, the Tao of Tai Chi.
内容我们主要以武当山的这个太极拳为主。那我们武当的这个太极系列呢，它是3个步骤，叫做无极生太极，太极生两仪。那无极所指的功法是什么呢？指的就是我们的站桩打坐。它这个目的就是在聚则生，在聚的过程中啊，能让我们生命得到延续啊，身体各方面得到新的生机。它是无极功的作用。太极功是在运则通，畅通气血。所以太极整个拳法的变化是在运的过程。两仪功是练自刚自柔，刚柔相济啊，所以它是讲究是发则功，发出去了，把气发出去了，就可以达到济积的一种目的。所以聚则生是无极功的作用，运则通是太极功的作用，发则功是两仪功的作用。所以3者兼修，就可以达到养生济积都结为一体了。
That was just a little sample of Tai Chi practice. Let's take a look at some other ways in which Taoism is kind of practically worked out, practically applied. Food and medicine will incorporate this, and you're going to watch a video for this week's homework assignments that'll explain this, using different spices and ingredients to complement each other for the sake of eating a healthy diet that promotes longevity and good health, combining different herbs and substances that complement each other to cure illnesses. You'll see a short video this week on that in your homework assignments. Feng Shui is the practice of arranging the pieces in living spaces in order to create balance with the natural world. I've often wanted to bring in a Feng Shui specialist to help me organize like my room and my office space. Have you ever noticed that you find certain ways of maybe arranging your room that's more relaxing than others? Maybe you find some spaces where it's easier to concentrate and you're more productive. Well, energies complement each other in a spatial way in Taoism. Let's take a look a little bit at some of the principles of Feng Shui. All right. No, that was our panda cubs. Here's some of the principles of Feng Shui. This is our source here is Al Jazeera.
The daughter of one of Hong Kong's most respected craftsmen is giving the discipline a modern makeover.
I try to make such a traditional practice into something that modern people can understand.
Her clients include fashion retailers, interior designers, and architects. By rearranging a space, she hopes to create harmony and new energy. Based on ancient Chinese culture, that translates to good health and prosperity.
It's said to be superstition, and that is, a shortcut to gaining wealth and wellness. And I think I discovered that it's actually something that is very natural. It's just about the relationship between the environment and the people.
Feng Shui is central to Chinese New Year celebrations. The streets are full of decorations for the Year of the Dog. But behind closed doors, the people of Hong Kong are using Feng Shui to clear their homes of ill fortune, in preparation for the year ahead.
There's going to be more stability, more harmony, more friendship, because I think there's been an awful lot of fear the last couple of years.
It may be an ancient Chinese tradition, but it's also become a lucrative career. Big names and big businesses are joining the ranks by using feng shui to re-energise and redesign buildings. And in Hong Kong, it's changing the city's landscape. Feng shui masters are often consulted before construction begins in Hong Kong. Despite its widespread adoption, some academics say the evidence is unproven and question why it's increasingly being promoted as science.
We see it all over the world. In the West, we see horoscopes, we see fortune tellers, we see psychic readers. So there's a certain percentage of the population that will always be duped by these pseudoscientific type activities.
Science or not, masters of the trade say the business of feng shui is growing. James Acuna applies it at home and in his work, and he's satisfied with the results.
Our lives are formulated by space, the spaces that we live in, the spaces where we work, where we play. If we don't take care of our space, if we keep it stagnant, if things don't change in the internal space, how are we supposed to grow as people?
It's that type of testimonial that's behind the modern revival of this ancient craft. Sarah Clark, Al Jazeera, Hong Kong.
Okay, so that was a little bit about feng shui, using these principles of yin and yang to create space that is fortunate and harmonious. And we saw different perspectives. We saw one individual who thought it was superstition, other individual who was like, oh, space is just naturally something important to us. And we saw the expert who is in charge of using these sort of ancient Taoist principles to create and construct space. And there is an industry behind it. I do want to say that there's a commercial aspect, hiring certain experts. So it can be a profession being a feng shui expert and decorator. All right, and we're about to just a few more things as we wrap up. So harmony and balance are the key. Taoism is an understanding. In this, we're looking at the early formation of the Zhou period. It's very much an internal tradition in its early phase, and very much looking to nature, whereas maybe they're Confucian interlocutors, they're these other groups of scholars. We learned the term Ru. These other groups are looking to study texts or rituals. All right, and this is again on government, because religion and government, the development of religions of China, how they proliferate, how they flourish, how they decline, always tied to ruling powers and ruling interests. And this is a theme we're going to see over and over again. And this is just a quote by Lao Tzu: "Leader is best when people barely know he exists. When his work is done, his aim is fulfilled, they will say, we did it ourselves." Lao Tzu very much wanted a sage king, an individual who would operate on this principle of doing as little as possible, letting things take their natural course. And really briefly, we're going to look at our next individual, and we'll study him a little bit more in detail, and we'll look at some passages from his writing next week. This is Chuang-Tzu. Chuang-Tzu's writing emphasizes an openness to reality, making us question what is real and what is not real. He had a fervor for the imagination. Like Lao Tzu, language has its limits. It can't really convey this deeper truth, this way, this Tao. So Chuang-Tzu's writing, as you'll see in this week's assigned readings, is full of metaphors, paradoxes, allegories. And then Lao Tzu, like many of the Taoist thinkers, will emphasize the harmony of opposites. All right, with this, we are saying goodbye we will look briefly at Chuangzi. So I don't want to say we're saying complete goodbye, but we're more or less saying goodbye to the Zhou period of Chinese history, a very, very important period for the development of ritual, art, dance, contemplative traditions, especially during this fair era of the Warring States, called the Spring and Autumn era. Next week, we're going to be spending a lot of time looking at Taoism as it develops in the Han era, where Taoism becomes more of an institutionalized religion supported by Han rulers, along with Confucianism. The Han rulers, the Han is a future dynasty after the Zhou. So we'll look at those dynamics, and then we'll look a little bit at some other contemporary modern Taoist rituals and practices. In the meantime, stay safe, stay well, and stay tuned.